Welcome to the Global Wellness HQ family of podcasts. We are your international headquarters for resources and ideas and insight in relation to the 9 elements of holistic wellness. Join us as we interview local and international wellness experts and learn how you can implement and improve one element or dimension of wellness at a time. Our experts will share their practical tips on wellness in one of these core areas: emotional, intellectual, occupational, physical, environmental, financial, spiritual, social, or habitual. We created our family of podcasts as a resource for anyone who is looking to integrate the 9 elements of holistic wellness into their daily lives. Welcome to the show. The Global Wellness HQ family of podcasts is proudly sponsored by the Global Wellness HQ community. It's an online membership group where we meet, we share ideas, we share insights, and we all work together and help one another discover our own personal wellness journeys. If you'd like to join us, you can easily click the link below or scan the QR code, and we love hearing your stories, so we hope to see you in the community. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Elizabeth Kaplan. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, Jeff.
Awesome. Now, let's jump right in. So, first of all, tell us who you are and what you do.
My name is Elizabeth Kaplan, and I am the founder of Elizabeth Kaplan Legal LLC. It is a boutique law firm in Cincinnati, Ohio. All we do is help companies manage global privacy, which is the protection of personal information.
I love it. And how did you get into that field in particular?
Well, it's actually a pretty long story, but a really amazing one that got me here. So in July 2017, I was on my way to work as a background investigator, and a Jeep Cherokee went through a red light and ran into me. I blacked out during the accident and had a very severe concussion. I was almost killed in that accident. And then I tried to work with a physical therapist, but I had trouble even counting to 3 in my head. I couldn't explain to my husband what I wanted for dinner. It was extremely difficult. The doctor, my personal doctor, gave me my disability papers, and I thought about filing for disability. I had every opportunity in the world. At the time, I was going to about 15 different doctor's appointments a week. And before that, had about 60 different companies that I'd helped administratively run, had done pretty much everything. I'd worked my way up from being a file clerk to running my own firm before. And I knew that nobody was going to hire me. And so it would have been super easy to just give up and file for disability and not worry about anything. But I knew as I actually sat there trying to make that phone call that it wasn't the right choice to make. So I started bringing myself back together. So one thing to point out is that when you're working with doctors in a situation like that, they help you get back to an average, stable way of dealing with the world, but they don't help you get beyond that. And I knew from passing the bar 20 years after going to school that I was not of average intelligence. So I started with some small jigsaw puzzles that were published by Art Puzzle. It's a free app on the internet in the Play Store. And I kept building my brain mentality up so that I could handle different things. That helped me start to be able to handle more information. And the more that I was able to accomplish, the more I wanted to do. So then I started taking an advanced paralegal certificate program, which was through Barbary and included 6 different classes. And I ended up passing with a 96.7% overall average, which, coming from where I'd been, was amazing. So I wanted even more. So then I started studying Spanish because I had done that in high school and college. And it physically felt really good on my head. It felt like somebody was massaging my head. And so I wanted more of that. So today I study 10 foreign languages: Spanish, Portuguese, German, French, Italian, Swedish, Norwegian, Danish, Turkish, and I just started Japanese yesterday. And so from that, I knew I usually do that before breakfast to reward myself and remind myself I can do something. You can't study that many languages and not be in a really good mental place. And it gave me confidence that I could do that, do something most people don't think that they can do. So then I came across privacy in March of 2022 through an online course on LinkedIn. And I instantly knew all of my skills on all the different interests that I had, the foreign languages and everything else, having moved around the world, all of it just fit so well into privacy. And so I called the IAPP, the certifying organization, that day, and I said, I want to take there's first three tests, the European Union test, the US test, and the management exam. And they said, well, you're going to have a tough time because you have to finish within a year. And it's pretty rare that people usually pass at least the first two on the first time. Are you sure you want to do this? And I said, I want to see how much I can accomplish. Bring it on. So I signed up for all of them. I passed all of them with flying colors. And I just kept getting reminded more and more that that's what I wanted to do. But little did I know at the time that when I set up my law firm to only accept small to mid-sized firms and help them manage data privacy and the flow of personal information through their companies, little did I know that I would be one of very few companies. I haven't been able to find any other companies that do exactly what I do. I did not realize that it was going to be such a need for this kind of company. So it's been an amazing journey. I am amazed at what I'm able to accomplish. I love solving privacy puzzles, and I am just really excited to see what the future holds.
I love the phrase solving privacy puzzles. So what does privacy mean to the average small business? Like what problem are you solving for them? Because I'm guessing most of them, if you're that unique, most of them don't know what the problem is that they should be solving.
Right, exactly. A lot of companies in the United States think that privacy and security are the same thing. And actually, security is only one aspect of privacy. In 2018, when GDPR, the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, went into effect, the state of privacy laws around the world changed. The kind of law that GDPR is, and that the California Consumer Privacy Rights Act is from California, did I say that right? California Consumer Privacy Act in California. Those kinds of laws are considered comprehensive privacy laws. And what that means is that each person, you and me and everybody listening, has a right to have your personal information protected. We have rights regarding that. That's the information that gives us our identity. And companies that collect personal information have a responsibility, both legally and morally, to handle that information properly. So security, data security, cybersecurity is one aspect of protecting that personal information. But privacy is bigger, actually, because privacy is about, okay, where do we get this information from? How can we set up our systems both with all of our staff, not just our IT people, with all of our staff? Where are we getting the information from? What rights do people have regarding their personal information? What laws from around the world, because they do often apply from outside the world? What rights apply to this? How can I streamline the information so that I can properly and time responsibly respond to people wanting information? How can I make sure when somebody posts a privacy policy when you post a privacy policy on your website, the FTC actually says that must be accurate and you must understand what's in that policy. And so you need to have somebody at your office who answers the phone when someone calls and says, yeah, sure, I can help you with our privacy policy. What would you like to know? Or let me transfer you to Annie, who works in this other department. instead of sending you all over the place. Because what you need to do is to make sure that when someone calls you, you know what they're talking about. Nowadays, if somebody calls your office and says, I want to talk to you about your privacy policy, many of us go, did we have one of those? You need to make sure that that you're responsive, that you at least know what it is. That's really important. If I can do nothing else for companies, I really want to give you somebody at your office who knows how to answer the phone properly, because you have the right, we each have the right to call a regulator and say, I don't think that so-and-so, this company out here, they're not answering my questions about my privacy at their company. So I want to file a complaint. And they have the right to do that. And then you get into trouble and suddenly you have a regulator from anywhere around the world, pretty much, saying, tell me how you handle privacy. And if you don't have somebody, that's a lot harder to explain than, oh, sure, we work with Liz and we were just working on that the other day. Or sure, here, let me give you these papers in this proper order, which it's really pretty easy to implement privacy policies into your company, but it sure does cause problems if you don't.
I can imagine, people at an office, putting the phone on hold and shouting, "Hey, what's our privacy policy?" Um,
Exactly, right?
I deal with a lot of website design companies, and honestly, I think they copy and paste from their last client to their next client,
Yes,
and not recognizing the significance that we've actually created a legal document. It's
yes,
not just it's not the homepage, contact page, privacy policy, check check check. It's, as you said, do we understand this?
correct. Your privacy policy on your website is actually a statement of promises that you are making to a consumer and to all of your clients about how you manage their personal information. So Section 5A of the FTC Act in the United States against unfair and deceptive advertising, if you are not doing what you say you're doing in your privacy policy, that's actually against federal law. And I would bet that 90% of companies either just copy something from someplace and think that's good enough. And most companies don't have a clue. So you don't even know what you're copying for sure. There's even a lot of law firms that I've seen that it's not compliant.
Wow. So what are the risks to a business? Let's start with that, the risk side first. But what are the risks to a business of either not having a privacy policy or not having a proper one? What, you talked about being in violation of federal laws. Um, if somebody complains, is it mostly complaint driven, or is there an active enforcement, like with other departments that are out there looking for violations, or is it just complaint driven?
It's both. There's actually many different sources, but to answer your question, so pretty much every company is either required or expected these days to have some kind of privacy policy on their website. So if you don't, and your competitor does, people are actually, they may not read everything, but they do often look to see, do you have one? And it just makes you look not quite as good as your competitor and a little bit risky if you don't have one, even if you're not required to have one. So you should have one. But your privacy policy is not just a matter of copying from somebody, because again, that puts you in violation of federal law potentially. But how it's a statement of how you manage your information. So there are ways to limit it to just your website and then have other privacy policies. You can have more than one. The privacy policy on your website should at least relate to your website. So how do you collect information? If that's not correct, that's a matter of federal law. But also the General Data Protection Regulation, many people think that in the European Union, many people think that it doesn't apply to them if A, they don't do business in the internationally, or they don't have any clients in any European nation. So any European member state. So That's actually not correct. Article 3 of the General Data Protection Regulation has 3 different grounds, which are exclusive and independent from each other, for which you could be liable under the General Data Protection Regulation. A, your company that collects the information or processes that information is physically located in the European Union, regardless of where they actually manage the information. So if you have an office over there, sure, you have to comply with GDPR. The second one is if you make an offer of services or products to a person in the European Union, regardless of whether a payment occurs, then you could be liable. So if your website just offers a service or product and they see it there, that's sufficient. The third one is, which has nothing to do with the other two, is if your website collects, if it monitors people in the EU, so if it collects cookie information on people in the European Union, regardless of the other two, you're still bound under GDPR. Many people don't realize that. And so much of what I do has to deal with education, just helping companies realize the different laws that do apply to them and helping them set up a framework to manage all of the personal information in a compliant manner. But when you are managing personal information, there are actually, within the next 10 years, it's expected that every US state is going to have a comprehensive privacy law. And many countries around the world have very similar privacy laws to the GDPR. So even if you're not having your website accessed in a European Union member state, but it is in Turkey or something, or in Africa, then probably a law there does still apply to you. So a big part of figuring this out is just figuring out which laws apply to you and what they all say. The good thing is most of these laws are pretty similar. It pretty much all comes down to what's called the OECD guidelines, which come from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The difference between US laws and global laws is that in the US, we look at data we look at personal information in a data kind of way. From HIPAA, it came about because of the need to standardize electronic billing, and FERPA, which deals with educational records, and the FCRA, which deals with credit reports, many banking laws. So we're used to handling data. We're not used to protecting personal rights in this country. And the US is the only major economic power that does not yet have a federal comprehensive privacy law. Around the world, especially in war-torn countries, and from the Holocaust, and from the Third Reich, and from like Ukraine and Russia, if you can imagine somebody in the Ukraine, their personal information falling into the hands of a Russian person in Russia, then that could potentially be catastrophic. In the United States, thank goodness, we're not used to situations like that. We're pretty safe here compared to most countries. But around the world, that's a real thing. They're concerned about personal information falling into the wrong hands. So their personal information is actually, they give their citizens a fundamental right to have their personal information protected. So they look at it much differently than we do. It's also not appropriate to apply US laws to global information. You really need somebody who's certified in both. I'm certified in European Union, US, and management of privacy. So when you're looking at US data, you have to look at the US laws, but you also have to take it into a global context. And as we grow, as our society evolves, we're going to become more personal rights based because we demand it, right? As each of us has an interest in protecting who we are, our information, especially when it's sensitive information, like whether you're elderly or your sexual preference or your race or whatever. There are certain kinds of information that are not typically address book information that we care a lot more about falling into the wrong hands. That's called sensitive personal information. So as to your question about where this comes from, people in the European Union do have the right to file a complaint with their local regulatory authority. So if somebody from Liechtenstein, which is in the European Economic Area, calls you and says, tell me about your privacy policy, and they get frustrated because you don't know what they're talking about, they can turn around and file a complaint with the Liechtenstein regulatory authority. And then they're probably going to call you and say, hey, Mr. Company, tell me how you manage personal information. And if you don't have an answer, then they have the right to fine you, or they have the right to suspend your processing or even close you for a time. And I've been asked many times, okay, but they're over there and we're here. Are they really going to care about us? So maybe not, but like I always say, and like I've been taught to say by the instructors and by people I've worked with, who wants to be the first one to challenge the Liechtenstein regulatory authority over what they can and can't do? That's going to take time and money that most small to medium-sized companies just don't have. So,
and I've dealt with regulators. They are literally a bottomless pit of resources. If they decide you're the example, guess what? They've got all the time and the money in the world to bother you. You don't want to be that small company fighting the big giant.
exactly. Plus, we only hear about companies in, like, say, Google and Facebook and other large companies that have a substantial presence over there. But if they're able to fight those kinds of companies and win, imagine what they can do to a small to mid-sized company. We don't stand much of a chance.
All
And
right.
that's actually what I want to protect, is it's not that difficult to figure out how you manage your personal information. It's not that difficult to put it into place and to understand it. And then that enables you to be the right company when somebody calls you to answers the phone. You know what you're doing as compared to your competitor who still doesn't know what to do when that phone call comes. It makes your investors happy because there's less risk. It makes the regulators happy because when your paperwork shows up on their desk, it's in the right order at least. So then your risk goes down. Just by looking at something, you know the difference between looking at a neat, orderly pile than a disorganized pile. You're much more likely to inquire about the disorganized one.
Right.
Your customers are happier. Your employees are happier because they know that you care, and there's lower turnover. Also, having worked as a secretary for over 20 years in many different capacities, I know the importance of bringing the front office together with the back end, the data end, so that your front end feels invested and it feels like they're part of the process. So that means they're less likely to forget about their obligations, and they feel like they're more a part of your family. So there's lower turnover. The public likes you better. It's faster by far to respond to any kind of public image issue because you are on top of this. So there's so many benefits and very little drawback.
I love that. So let's talk about things. I like to give practical advice. So, what are some things small, medium-sized businesses could do today on their own, just either to get ready to work with you or to prepare or to enhance their privacy policies? What are a couple of quick wins they can get from listening to the show?
Yeah, sure. So one would be to make sure that you have a good cookie dashboard. And there are several of them on the market that say, some of them are even free. I don't know the name of one off the top of my head, but there are, and I don't really want to market one over another. I'm not in that business, but yeah, I'm not in the cookie selling business. But there are several good cookie dashboards out there that do advertise that they help you manage all of your GDPR obligations. And one like that is probably sufficient. If you go onto if you look for general data protection regulation text, then you'll see the kind of pop-up or disclaimer for cookies that it needs to at least comply with. And many of the ones that you'll find on Google or whatever your search site is, many of those that say we're a cookie dashboard, many of those are even better than the one that you'll come across on the GDPR website. So I would definitely say that's a starting point. and then make sure that your privacy policy actually does do what your company does. Make sure it's at least consistent with what your practices are. And then also make sure that you are saying who you are. You need to have somebody who the person can contact if they're calling you. So make sure that that person gets up to date on what privacy is. And there's several good resources on the internet. But that person is totally welcome to call me if they can't find anything. But 513-581-8460. But that person is totally welcome to call me and ask me questions. I will do what I can. But there's a lot of good resources on the internet too that will help you understand what needs to be put into a privacy statement. Don't just copy them. It should also be up to date. I saw one the other day that was from 2014 and GDPR went into effect in 2018. So you want to make sure that your date for your privacy policy is at least 2018, because right away that's a red flag. You also want to start looking at how your company actually manages the data that you collect, the personal information that you collect. And then also you want to make sure that your subcontractors have some kind of similar practice. They're also looking at their privacy policies. You're looking at your obligations with regard to your subcontractors to make sure that everybody is working together in some compliant manner.
I love that. So thank you for sharing that, those tips. Now, if people want to connect with you, usually I recommend LinkedIn, but what are some of the ways people can connect with you and learn more about privacy?
Sure. My website is EKL Global, eklglobal.com. That's up to date and has a way to reach me from there. My LinkedIn address is Elizabeth Kaplan ESQ, I think.
I'll put the link in the notes so we don't have to worry about spelling.
Okay.
I make it easy for people, especially our guests. All right. Well, is there anything, you're the expert, is there anything I should have asked you about global privacy that I haven't asked you?
I don't think so, not for this beginning conversation. I am going to be starting a free meetup on July 12th at 6 o'clock in the evening Eastern Standard Time. Just go on meetup.com and look for Cincinnati GDPR and sign up there. That's going to be a free monthly hour or two based on your interests. And we're going to have speakers. I'm already lining up speakers like forensics and IT and marketing and a pen testing company and an incident breach counsel. They're all going to be making visits. So that's a free, pretty easy way to just put that on your calendar and be able to meet other people in the similar space and get more information too.
Awesome. Well, Elizabeth, thank you for taking time out to be on the show with me today.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our show. We hope that you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to either click the link below or scan the QR code to register and listen to other episodes of our podcast. Or if you think your business or you would be a great guest to be on our show, we're always looking for experts in one of the 9 elements of holistic wellness. We'd love to have you. You can either click the link below or you can scan the QR code and complete our speaker intake form. Thank you, and to your wellness.